Now, I want to show on this very short video just one of the ways that we use in the shop to touch up chips out of the paint. And this is Luciano's Ducati we're going to use for a guinea pig here. There's a chip in the end of the fairing, a small chip. Now, of course, the first step on any repair like this, using Sicken's M600, totally degrease the part that you're going to be painting, and definitely go over it 3 or 4 times. Clean paper towels. I use Bounties. Then backmasking it with thin masking tape and tin foil. And I want to make sure that in there I have it as clean as possible. So I use compressed air to blow in there, and even taking a little razor and scratching it up so I get the surface as rough as possible. And then the method that I like to use is using tin foil masking tape, mask off the parts that we're not going to be touching up. Now here's the part that on the previous photo showed. There's another piece up here that had a big chunk missing, and then there's a little chunk up here. So we have 3 areas that we're going to basically be working on. And I didn't want to have to repaint the whole fairing. A simple reason, we're in the middle of the riding season. Well, we're actually at the end of the riding season, but if this were in the middle of the winter, I would have suggested we just repaint the whole fairing. Then you know it'll match. Another step was to reinforce the back of it with 3 coats of fiberglass. This was all roughened up, and I let that dry out in the sun. Made sure that was good and hard, because otherwise these repairs tend to crack. So now that they're all backed up with fiberglass, now you think there's a better chance, hopefully a better chance, that we'll get this to match real nice. Now it's always, the difficult thing here is to get the contour back. And now because this is raw plastic, these parts, and they're Ducati parts, they're plastic, not fiberglass, we also have the problem of maybe this paint is not going to really want to stick to that. Some days you will get paint to stick, some days not. Depending on what the polycarbonate is, and depending on what grade of plastic and what kind of paint you're using. So it can get complicated. But we were lucky in this case, and I didn't want to reprimer it, because priming it over brings this paint edge, makes the paint edge even thicker than it has to be to do this kind of a touch-up. The idea is to keep the edge of the paint as thin as possible. We also had this carbon fiber piece that had a chunk missing here. Now there's a real good trick you can use, and I've shared this trick before. Anybody trying to fix a carbon fiber part, it's got a big gouge up here and a gouge here all along the edge. What you do is you use a Sharpie marker that's made for laundry, a laundry marker. And what that laundry marker does, it mimics the carbon fiber, and you do it like a checkerboard. And you can pretty much, when you're done with that, the first thing, of course, you want to do is get everything roughened up. And then if you get the first coat of clear on there, and it doesn't look right, you can always go back, resand it like this, and do it over again. But you can really fudge it and get it real nice if you just do a little practice. But what mimics carbon fiber the best is Sharpie laundry markers. A good tip. And by the way, another tip, if you're so inclined, if you go around your bike every once in a while where there are little scratches on a frame or things that you're not going to touch up with paint, you can just hit them with that marker, especially around the control areas and stuff, and it tends to stay there for a couple of months before it wears out. So back to our part, and this part I had let dry out, put plenty of M600 on it, put the first coat of Bondo on it. Ordinary Bondo on a case like this would be fine. And this has to be resanded out. Once it's sanded out and flat, now this particular repair got tricky, because we're not going to paint the whole part. It's getting the color match that gets to be difficult now, and there's a trick to it. By the way, I wanted to show the carbon fiber part came out like a brand new part. And that's all Sharpie marker. So now here's what, when you're actually spraying this, if you can avoid primer, that makes it better, because the edge where you're going to pick up the tape, you want to keep that as thin as possible, And actually, there's another step to this. Is what you do is then you put on the first coat of yellow, then you peel up this blue tape and move it back a 1/64 of an inch. Just touch that with sandpaper, spray it again, but just airbrush in the edge, just feather it in. When it's dry, move the tape back even just another 1/64 of an inch. Then when you put the clear on, if you put the first coat of clear on here, and let it dry, and you move that tape back just a little more, instead of having a 90-degree edge like a step, you have the equivalent of an easement curve. So in this case, now I'm not sure when I did this I got the color exactly right, but it's certainly close enough. And our edge came out just about as good as I could have expected. I was really impressed with how that came out. Now, but the last step on this is to let it dry overnight, not pull this off. If you're in a rush to pull tape, you always wind up getting a crappy edge, especially with urethane. So once that's dry overnight, and in my case, I just put it in the garage to dry overnight. I don't want to touch it because I'm always tempted to just peel up the tape and let's see if it matches. Peel up the tape. So what I did instead of that is I went and I had other work to do on the motorcycles this day. And when I came back in the morning and looked at it, I put it out in the sun for an hour or so. The sun, by the way, softens up the tape. Or if you're inside, you can use a heat gun or a hairdryer, warm the tape before you pull it back. The idea being to get the edge. You want to feather the edge in as much as possible. And when I was all done with it, now you could be the judge of, these are the touch-up areas. There's an area right here. There's an area here. And I'm not sure the other area is up here. But I think this is going to be totally okay. Now, when winter time comes, what happened with this bike, the top part has a coat of clear over the decals, and the bottom part doesn't have clear on the decals. So if we worded it over the winter, split the fairing with these screws, I could put clear on the bottom of this, which also would blend this in even more. But in the meantime, because we're in the middle of the riding season, we wanted to get this bike back on the road as soon as possible. And the thing with any motorcycle, with any bike, car, no matter what it is if you keep after it, it doesn't seem like it's ever a big job. But when you let things go and let them go and let them go, it's like letting the weeds take over the garden. And I would much rather, on a regular basis, go around the bike, touch it up even with a brush if I have to, and then when winter comes and it's cold, then I can re-clear. Well, this whole part I'll probably re-clear over the winter. This doesn't really need to be done. But again, this is just one little tip. I hope some of this information is usable. That's pretty cute. Because every bike I ever see that has a little chip out of the paint, a little chip and a little chip, it all adds up and pretty soon you don't even want to touch it up. So I hope that information is useful.